Hi Year 11. Today I just want to go back over a concept that I introduced to you in a previous lesson. And that is the idea of signpost words and the layers. So in your exams, you will have questions that look fairly similar. They're all going to be from a sort of formula. They will have a signpost word of sort, and they will have multiple layers. In the example that we looked at in the first lesson was this one here. The signpost word was outline. Then you have to break up the question into different layers to give you a sophisticated answer. So the first one we identified was that it was going to be about the materials and that we can connect to the structural frame. And then the second layer was going to be about developing ideas, which we can connect to the postmodern frame. It's up to you, as the person sitting the exam, to be able to break up the question into those different layers. It's also up to you to then connect whichever analytical framework you deem to be most appropriate. That's why we have to know our frames, artist practice, and conceptual framework. They help us answer these questions. So let's go on to a new one. Describe how Cressida Campbell's makes artworks about her world. So, with this one, our signpost word is describe. So, in the first lesson that we did on this mini unit, we looked at what those different words means. A lot of you told me that the word describe means to just tell someone about how something looks, which is correct. So, you're going to be describing how Cressida Campbell's makes artworks about her world. So our first layer is going to be this bit here, how Cressida Campbell makes artworks. We can connect that very easily to artist practice and the how. Now, we know that the how in artist practice is materials, technique, which means that we need to go down here and look at the information that we know is so important because we did a whole lesson on it. The next part is world, which I think you could connect to subjective frame because see how it says her world, it's personal experience, like her personal narrative, linking it back to Frida Kahlo if you wanted to use that kind of similar ideas, or cultural because it's talking about her world, so the world that she lived in, the time that she lived in. So that is how I've broken up this question. Signpost word, we've picked out one layer which is about her artist practice and another layer which is about the subjective frame or cultural frame. You could also do the world agency of the conceptual framework. I'm not going to answer that question now. I'm going to look at another artwork to go through that again. So this one you would have seen in the previous lesson that we just did. Identify the main characteristics of their art-making practice as represented in the images below. Signpost word, identify, which means you need to be able to pick out from the information given and the images. Identify is the signpost word. The main characteristics is the first layer, which means you're going to be using the structural frame. And art making practice is the second layer, the how and the why they make art. So again, in case I've confused you, identify the main characteristics of their art making practice as represented in the images below. You can easily pick out the signpost word, it's here, identify. You should know what that means because we did a lesson on it. And what the word identify means, or what is it most similar to? Is it similar to describe, discuss, explain? That's for you to decide. The first layer of the question, you will need to answer about the main characteristics of their art-making practice. You will then need to identify the second layer, the how and the why they make art. Now, the main characteristics and the how, they kind of cross over. So you want to just make sure when you're answering this question that you're not being too repetitive. But the point of me explaining this again is just that you're aware of what we're doing. We're breaking up the question into 3 different things. A signpost word, so we know how to answer the question. Are we describing it? Are we explaining it? Are we analyzing it? What are we doing? And then we want to pick out 2 layers so that we have lots of different things to talk about, not just one thing. We want to make our answers and responses as sophisticated as we can to get us the most marks. One more. Skip all this stuff. Okay, this one I haven't broken up into colors or anything. So our signpost word is analyze. You can see it at the very start of the question. The question itself is analyze how Russell Drysdale represents and interprets his world in plates 2 and 3. Now, just a little tidbit for you. Whenever there's more than one artwork, you need to discuss both. And you probably want to draw connections and comparison between the 2. So, analyze how Russell Drysdale represents and interprets his worlds in plates 2 and 3. So, our first layer is possibly Russell Drysdale. We know we want to talk about who that is, what does he do, why does he do it, which is our artist practice. How does he represent and interpret his world? That could be the subjective frame, the world agency of the conceptual framework. It could be the postmodern frame. It is up to you to use what you've got in your toolkit of the artist practice, the how and the why, the conceptual framework, the 4 agencies, and the 4 frames, structural, cultural, subjective, postmodern. Okay, what I'm going to do now is put up an Edmodo quiz, and I'm going to give you different questions. And I'm just going to ask you to tell me what things are. So what layers can you pick out in the question, and what the signpost words are. Okay, if you have any questions about this, I really need you guys to ask me, because I don't want to move forward if you don't understand what I'm talking about. Please ask me if you have any questions, and I hope that you are all staying safe and staying home and looking after each other. Okay, bye.